diplomacy, public diplomacy, and trade as three avenues that China can use to build on its soft power. I'm curious how you would rank those three. I mean, public diplomacy, some of the education programs, the training programs for students you talked about would certainly be termed long-term, in that we need to wait for those students to move on in their lives before they can actually impact diplomacy or things like that. You know, trade, investment, things like that have a more immediate role, and that's certainly something that folks in Washington have been focusing on a lot prior to everyone leaving town in August, except for us. So I'm curious how you would rank those three avenues that you talked about.
Well, I think trade is the most important, and China is very aggressively highlighting its foreign trade, but also has been pretty sophisticated in places where there are concerns, not the U.S., but in developing countries where there are concerns about trade with China, to actually formulate a trade policy that takes into some extent those concerns. Again, I want to differentiate. China's relations with the U.S. is very different than everyone else. But like a good example is South Africa, where there were and are a lot of concerns about the impact of trade with China on South Africa's own textile industry. South Africa is the most important country in Africa, and it's an important country for China to have a strong relationship with. And the Chinese are willing to take some, essentially, reductions or essentially quotas on the amount of textile exports they have to South Africa in order to build a trade relationship. So I think that's not only a sophisticated policy, but an understanding that trade is both very important and a game that you invest in for the long term, which I would not say that they always recognized in the past. I don't know that you can rank them. I mean, I think if you look at the amount of time and money that's spent now on public diplomacy, there's clearly a very high priority. If you look at the amount of money that's spent on the Confucius Institute project, if you look at the amount of time and money that's spent on a lot of the kind of informal summits held in China, there's clearly, and this is particularly relevant, I think, in Asia, where a lot of these summits are targeted. There's a lot of real investment put into them. There is not necessarily, like in the U.S., a portion of the one of the problems China has is there's not necessarily a portion of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs that is coherently thought out project by project. So a lot of this tends to happen because someone has an idea. But I definitely think that a lot of time and money has been invested in that going back only about 10 years. There really wasn't much effort on that front before, unless you go back to the 50s and 60s when there was, but it was all based on building relations with revolutionary groups and cultivating and developing revolutionary groups around the world, particularly in places where there was a war.
This is the competency of government that you mentioned, the growing competency. Is that reaching out to the business community, and will that increase attractiveness for multinational corporations to set up facilities there?
Facilities in China?
In China.
Well, I don't think multinational corporations have had any been shy about setting up facilities. I'm sorry, I'm a little bit. Whether the government's foreign policy is going to make it more attractive for multinationals to set up in China?
Well, increasing competency of managers. Are they starting in government and then working their way up?
Okay. I mean, I would say that I'm not sure that the Chinese government. Well, the Chinese government it's hard to say what the Chinese government is. I mean, there's a central government, a local government. As a business person, the local government in a province level or even the mayor of the city is probably much more important to you than what Hu thinks, unless you're the really significant company. But I don't know that the central government is or is not any more or less competent than they were 5 or 6 years ago. My point is just that the diplomatic corps has become vastly better. And whether that means that it makes it a more attractive environment for companies to invest in China. I mean, China is an attractive environment for companies to invest there for reasons that have little to do with China's foreign policy and everything to do with China as a manufacturing base and a consumer market. The quality of the managers, I think, also has very little to do with the quality of China's diplomatic corps, other than just, in general, the Chinese education system produces a fairly high number of quality people.